the young prince, Paris.
Get my ship.
I want her back.
Well, of course you do. She's a beautiful woman.
I want her back so I can deal with my
He can't be controlled. He's as likely to fight us as the Trojans.
You don't need to control my audiences.
Where's my dog?
Will not fight for him. I'm not asking you to fight for him.
Father.
I'm surprised you let him bring the finest master hand
The first thing Evelyn Salt insists on is that she is not a spy. That would be an ordinary denial in almost any thriller. Here, it becomes the first lock on the box, because the film soon asks you to accept the opposite. She works for the CIA. She lives inside coded rooms, hidden loyalties, and professional lies. Yet when she says those words under extreme pressure, the question is not simply whether she's telling the truth. The question is which version of the truth she is protecting. That contradiction is our first clue. Welcome to the film box, where we do not stop at what a movie shows us. We open compartments beneath it. We follow the objects, choices, silences, and contradictions that keep changing meaning as the story moves. And Salt is built almost entirely from those shifting meanings. A glance can be a confession. An escape can look like guilt. A rescue can become evidence. Even love can be treated like a weakness, a disguise, or the only honest thing left. Every film is a box. We open it together. And today we are opening a film that refuses to let its central character stand still long enough for us to define her. Evelyn Salt is presented as a capable intelligence officer, a devoted wife, a survivor, and perhaps something far more dangerous. The film places those identities side by side, then shakes the box until you can no longer tell which one belongs on top. That is what makes Salt more interesting than its reputation as a fast-moving spy thriller might suggest. On the surface, it is built from pursuit, suspicion, disguises, and sudden reversals. It moves quickly because it wants you reacting before you have time to settle. But underneath that speed is a sharper question. What happens when every action you take can be interpreted as proof against you? Run, and you look guilty. Stay, and you may lose control of the story. Tell the truth, and no one knows which truth you mean. This is where the film quietly turns identity into a form of action. Salt does not simply possess an identity, she performs one under pressure. The people around her study her movements, her history, her marriage, and even her silence as if each detail could reveal a hidden mechanism. But the more they examine her, the less stable she becomes. She is not a puzzle with one missing piece. She is a puzzle in which every piece may have been cut to fit more than one picture. That tension gives the film its particular energy. You are not only watching to discover whether Salt can escape, you are watching to understand what the escape means. Is she protecting herself? Protecting someone else? Completing a plan? Breaking one? The film keeps those possibilities alive by making movement itself suspicious. And that brings us back to the opening denial. When Salt says she is not a spy, the line does more than introduce her profession through contradiction. It tells us how this entire film will communicate. Words will be unstable. Levers will be incomplete. Loyalty will depend on who is looking. The truth will not arrive as a clean answer. It will appear through pressure, choice, and consequence. My personal rating for Salt is 5.8 out of 10. That score reflects a film I find energetic, stylish, and frequently gripping, but also uneven in the places where its emotional and logical foundations need more weight. We will get to those weaknesses later. For now, I want to stay with what the film does immediately and effectively. It creates doubt, then weaponizes that doubt against its own protagonist. So as we open this box, keep one question close. When a person has spent years surviving through controlled identities, what would honesty even look like? Because the most gripping thing about Salt is not that everyone may be lying. It is that one person may be telling several truths at once. Salt gives you a strange assignment almost immediately. Watch the person being hunted more carefully than the people chasing her. That sounds obvious. She is the protagonist. Of course, your attention stays with her, but the film makes that attention uncomfortable because Evelyn Salt never behaves like someone waiting for the truth to rescue her. She calculates, she adapts, she notices exits before anyone else realizes she might need one. Every movement suggests training far beyond ordinary self-preservation, and the more capable she appears, the more suspicious she becomes. That is the trap. Most thrillers ask whether innocent person can clear their name. Saul asks something more slippery. What if the accused person is innocent of one thing, guilty of another, and unable to explain the difference without exposing everything? The accusation against her is designed to collapse her life in seconds. It does not arrive to a long investigation or a trail of carefully assembled proof. It arrives through one man, one claim, and one terrifying possibility. Salt may not be the person her colleagues think she is. From that point onward, every skill that once made her valuable becomes evidence against her. Her knowledge of security procedures no longer proves experience, it proves preparation. Her ability to remain calm no longer looks professional. It looks rehearsed. Her instinct to disappear does not look like survival. It looks like activation. The mechanism becomes visible here. The film takes the qualities that define an elite intelligence officer and turns them into reasons not to trust her. That reversal is what makes the premise work. Salt cannot prove herself through ordinary behavior because ordinary behavior is no longer available to her. The moment she is accused, the system surrounding her begins interpreting everything in the darkest possible way. She is forced to choose between appearing innocent and staying alive, knowing she may not be able to do both. But beneath that chase is something more personal. There is one part of Salt's life that does not fit neatly inside the machinery of espionage: her marriage. Her husband represents a connection that appears simple, private, and emotionally real. He is not merely someone waiting at home. He is evidence that Salt may have built a life beyond duty, secrecy, and survival. That makes him important. It also makes him vulnerable. The film understands that the strongest threat against a highly trained person is not always physical force. Sometimes it is the possibility that the one thing they allowed themselves to love has been discovered by the wrong people. Now put those two details together. Salt is accused of hiding a secret identity. At the same time, the only relationship that might prove she has a genuine self becomes impossible to separate from the danger surrounding her. The professional mask and the private person begin pulling in opposite directions. That is why the film moves with such urgency. Salt is not simply racing away from capture. She is racing toward an answer she may not want, while trying to reach someone the system treats as irrelevant. Every locked door forces a decision. Every decision creates another interpretation. Every interpretation pushes her further from the identity she was supposed to defend, and the film keeps one possibility hanging over everything. Perhaps Salt is not trying to convince anyone because she already knows they would misunderstand the truth. This is where the work tightens. You are not waiting for the story to reveal whether she can fight, escape, improvise, or deceive. The opening makes it clear that she can do all of those things. You are waiting to discover which part of her is doing them: the loyal officer, the frightened wife, the hidden operative, or someone who has learned to use every identity without fully belonging to any of them. Salt keeps moving before you can choose. That speed is deliberate. Stillness would allow certainty, and certainty is the one thing this film refuses to give you. So the real suspense is not whether Evelyn Salt has a secret. It is whether the secret belongs to her or whether it was placed inside her life long before she had the power to choose. To understand why this thriller is built around that uncertainty, we have to look behind the chase and examine how the film itself was designed. Before Evelyn Salt became a woman racing through Washington with half the intelligence community behind her, the character was Edwin Salt, a role developed with Tom Cruise in mind. After Cruise left the project, the screenplay reached Angelina Jolie and was substantially reconsidered around her. That production turn matters because the movie did not begin as a carefully designed statement about a female spy entering a male action genre. It began with the machinery of a conventional male-led thriller already running, then placed Jolie inside it and discovered that the machinery behaved differently. Jolie later explained that changing the protagonist was not as simple as switching a name. Elements connected to the original hero's family had to be reconsidered because the same choices would be judged differently when made by a woman. The rewrite therefore removed some familiar emotional instructions that action films often place around female characters. Salt is not repeatedly softened for you. She is not required to explain every hard decision through motherhood, romance, or visible vulnerability. That absence becomes part of the mystery. The film lets her occupy the frame as an operative first, then makes you search for the human being beneath the training. This changes our central clue. When Salt moves with cold precision, the film does not pause to reassure you that she remains traditionally sympathetic. It allows competence itself to become unsettling. A male operative with those abilities might have felt familiar, perhaps too familiar. With Jolie, the same design gains another layer because the movie knows you may be searching her face for emotional permission. She rarely gives it. Her stillness becomes as important as her speed. Her refusal to explain herself is no longer just a thriller device. It becomes a challenge to the expectations surrounding her. You are forced to decide whether emotional restraint means discipline, dishonesty, damage, or all three at once. That choice was strengthened by the research surrounding the performance. Director Philip Noyce hired former CI officer Melissa Boyd Marl as a consultant. Marle examined the intelligence wall logic of the story, while Jolie studied not only professional behavior but also the isolation experienced by someone who cannot discuss the truth of their work with family. That is a crucial distinction. The film's realism does not come mainly from convincing you that every enormous action beat could happen exactly as shown. Mala herself acknowledged that the nearly superhuman lone operative belongs more to Hollywood fantasy than ordinary intelligence work. The useful realism lies in the smaller emotional mechanism. Secrecy does not end when the assignment ends. You can feel that idea in Salt's controlled presence. She does not carry secrecy like a coat she puts on at work. It appears fused to her posture. She watches before answering. She gives away only what a moment requires. Even in personal spaces, complete relaxation seems impossible. The consultant's influence matters because it redirects attention away from gadgets and secret codes toward behavior. A convincing spy is not someone who looks mysterious every second. A convincing spy is someone whose ordinary behavior has been trained to reveal almost nothing. Noyce's own approach reportedly grew from years of speaking with former and serving intelligence professionals. He believed real espionage stories could be stranger than invented ones, which helps explain why Salt is presented with such a straight face even as its premise grows increasingly extreme. The director does not continually wink at you or apologize for the story. He treats the paranoia as emotionally real. That seriousness gives the reversals enough weight to keep moving, even when the logic begins stretching. It also tells us something about the film's world. Salt is not shaped like a glamorous fantasy in which espionage offers freedom, luxury, and perfect control. Its offices feel procedural, its institutions feel suspicious. Information is not a magical key that solves problems. It can be planted, altered, hidden, or interpreted by the wrong person. The more these characters know, the less certain they often become. Research therefore serves the film best not through exact operational detail but through the atmosphere of permanent doubt. These people work in a profession where a believable story may be more useful than a true one. Once the accusation against Salt enters that environment, truth becomes only one competing version of events. The production made a similarly revealing decision about physical action. Jolie worked closely with second unit director and stunt coordinator Simon Crane, who pushed her movement away from graceful display. Jolie recalled being encouraged to fight with greater toughness and less elegance. Noyce also emphasized the amount of physical stunt work she performed herself. That does not make every stunt realistic. It does something more valuable for this particular story. It keeps Evelyn Salt's body connected to the consequences of her decisions. When she runs, climbs, falls, or forces herself through an escape, you are not only watching spectacle, you are watching identity become physical. She cannot stop to argue her case, so her body becomes the argument. Her reflexes reveal training. Her endurance reveals history. Her willingness to absorb punishment reveals that survival is not an instinct she learned yesterday. Every impressive movement protects her, but it also makes the accusation against her easier to believe. Because Jolie's movement is deliberately stripped of decorative elegance, the action usually avoids turning Salt into a display object. The fights are about efficiency. She uses momentum, surroundings, surprise, and whatever advantage a single second can offer. The result is a character who seems dangerous not because the movie constantly announces it, but because she wastes so little motion. The official credits reveal another useful part of this construction. Noyce worked with cinematographer Robert Elswit, editors Stuart Baird and John Gilroy, production designer Scott Chambliss, and composer James Newton Howard. That team gives the thriller a combination of polish and pressure. Elswit's images allow the environments to feel solid enough for Salt's physical movement to carry weight. The editing keeps the story advancing before certainty can settle. The production design surrounds her with corridors, barriers, glass, checkpoints, and institutional spaces built to control movement. However's music supplies urgency without turning every moment into triumph. Those elements serve the same central idea. Salt is always moving through systems designed to identify, classify, and contain people. The locations are not just backgrounds, they are machines of judgment. Every camera, locked room, official uniform, and security barrier ask the same question in a different form. Who belongs here? Now the earlier contradiction becomes clearer. The film itself began with one identity for its hero and rebuilt that identity without removing the action framework. Its star studied a profession based on concealment. Its director grounded an outrageous pursuit in the emotional reality of secrecy. Its stunt team turned physical performance into evidence. Its creative crew built a world in which every space appears to examine the person moving through it. Everything behind the lens points toward the same mechanism. Evelyn Salt survives because identity is never merely who she is. Identity is something created between her choices and the eyes judging them. With that machinery in place, we can finally open the film on its own terms. What it is, who built it, and why this particular spy story deserves attention beyond the chase. Salt was released in 2010, directed by Philip Noyce and written by Kurt Wimmer. Angelina Jolie plays CIA officer Evelyn Salt, with Liev Schreiber as her colleague Tedwinta, Chiwetel Ejiofor as counterintelligence officer Peabody, and Daniel Obritsky as the Russian defector whose accusation detonates the story. Officially, the film sits across action, suspense, drama, and contemporary espionage thriller territory. My spoiler-free verdict is simple. Salt is a highly efficient chase thriller wrapped around a more interesting identity puzzle than it ultimately knows how to resolve. It is fast, controlled, and easy to stay with. It also asks for several leads that become harder to ignore once the momentum slows. At its best, though, the film knows exactly what it wants you to feel: doubt moving at the speed of action. The title is the first compact piece of that design. Salt is an ordinary word attached to an extraordinary person. It is short, hard, and almost impossible to decorate. It can sound like a surname, a code name, or a label placed on someone by an institution. Its usefulness lies in how little it tells you. Evelyn Salt enters the story already named, already classified, and already working inside a system that believes names should lead to certainty. Then one accusation breaks that certainty apart. The film exists at the meeting point between two traditions. One is the Cold War story of sleeper agents planted deep inside an enemy nation, waiting years for a command. The other is the modern fugitive thriller, where surveillance and institutional power can turn an accusation into a nationwide hunt before the accused person can form a defense. Salt combines those fears. The threat may have been planted in the past, but the pursuit belongs to the present. That combination creates the central treasure. A sleeper agent story asks whether a hidden loyalty can survive beneath an ordinary life. A fugitive story asks whether an individual can survive once the state decides that ordinary life was camouflage. Evelyn Salt stands between those questions. At heart, this is not really a story about proving innocence. It is a story about ownership. Who owns the identity Salt has built? Does it belong to the country she serves, the people who shaped her, the husband who loves her, or the woman making decisions beneath all those layers? The action keeps that question from becoming abstract. Salt does not receive the luxury of explaining herself in a safe room. Her choices are made while doors close. Colleagues turn and time disappears. The film therefore measures identity through behavior. What she protects matters more than what she claims. Where she runs matters more than what she denies. That is why Jolie is the movie's essential center. Schreiber brings familiarity and restrained authority to the institutional side of Salt's life. Ejiofor gives the pursuit more intelligence rather than reducing it to faceless opposition. Obritsky introduces the accusation with the unnerving calm of someone who understands how destructive a few carefully chosen facts can be. But the film depends on Jolie holding several possible versions of Evelyn inside the same expression. This is a film for you if you enjoy espionage stories that move quickly, protagonists whose motives remain uncertain, and action sequences built around improvisation. It also works if you like watching a star carry a thriller through physical control and guarded emotion. You may connect with it less if you need airtight political logic, deeply developed supporting characters, or a mystery that answers every question with equal strength. Sort prefers velocity to complete explanation. Sometimes that is its greatest advantage. Sometimes it becomes the reason the box feels lighter than expected. Still, the movie understands its promise. It gives you a woman accused of being someone else, then refuses to let any single identity contain her. Before we judge whether that mystery holds, we need to return to the first minutes and ask what the film feels like before the chase takes control. The opening of Sword does not introduce Evelyn through power. It introduces her through helplessness. She is imprisoned in North Korea, physically weakened and repeatedly accused of being an American spy. The setting is stripped of glamour. There are no polished agency offices, clever gadgets, or triumphant displays of skill. There is only a woman under pressure, holding on to the same denial that will later become impossible to interpret clearly. She insists she is not a spy. At first, the line feels simple. It sounds like survival. The film gives you little reason to doubt her because the cruelty of the situation immediately places your sympathy on her side. You do not begin by studying her for deception. You begin by wanting her to get out. That emotional positioning is important. The movie earns your trust before it asks you to question it. The opening also creates a promise about vulnerability that the rest of the film only partially keeps. Salt is not introduced as an unstoppable action figure. She is shown as someone who can be trapped, hurt, and stripped of control. Her strength lies in endurance rather than domination. Then she is released. Her husband, Mike, has apparently applied enough pressure to make her situation visible and politically inconvenient. He does not rescue her through violence. His persistence helps pull her back into the world. This gives their relationship weight before the main plot even begins. He has already seen Evelyn at her most endangered, and she knows that her survival is connected to his refusal to abandon her. That matters because the marriage could easily have felt like a decorative detail added to humanize an otherwise distant protagonist. Instead, the opening makes it part of her emotional foundation. Mike is associated with rescue, safety, and the possibility of a life that exists beyond intelligence work. The film then jumps forward and the contrast is immediate. Salt now appears composed, professional, and fully integrated into the CIA. The woman who once had no control over the room has become the person who understands how rooms are controlled. Her posture is different. Her expression is guarded. The helpless captive and the precise officer feel almost like separate identities. This is our first meaningful transformation of the clue. When she denied being a spy in captivity, we understood the sentence as protection from her captors. Once we see her working inside the CIA, the same denial changes shape. It was technically false, yet emotionally persuasive. Salt was lying about her profession, but the film still made the lie feel truthful because she was using it to survive. That becomes the pattern of the entire movie. Salt's words may be inaccurate while her emotional purpose remains sincere. She can deceive someone and still be protecting something real. The film teaches you this before the central accusation arrives. The atmosphere of the first 10 minutes is unusually tense for a mainstream action thriller because it moves from physical confinement into procedural calm without offering genuine relief. The CIA office may appear safer than the prison, but it is another controlled environment. Doors lock, conversations are monitored, identities are checked. Information travels to systems that can immediately change how a person is treated. The violence has disappeared, but the feeling of examination remains. Then the Russian defector arrives. He does not behave like someone trying to overpower Salt. He attacks her through narrative. He tells the story carefully enough that the institution around her begins to react before anyone can prove whether it is true. The atmosphere shifts with almost no visible explosion. One moment, Salt is the interrogator. The next, she is becoming the subject of the interrogation. That reversal hooked me more than the physical pursuit that follows. The film places Salt across from a man who appears to know pieces of her life that should be impossible for him to know. His calmness makes the information more disturbing. He is not rushing because he understands that once doubt enters the room, the system will do most of the work for him. This is where the movie becomes hard to look away from. You begin watching Salt's face for a reaction. Not a large reaction, a fracture, a pause, a tiny change that might tell you whether the accusation is absurd or whether it has reached something hidden. Jolie plays the moment with enough control to keep every interpretation open. Salt looks disturbed, but an innocent officer would be disturbed. She looks calculating, but a trained officer would calculate. She becomes concerned about her husband, but that concern can mean love, fear, or the realization that an exposed secret has placed him in danger. Nothing settles. The premise promises a familiar spy thriller, but the opening delivers something closer to an identity ambush. The threat does not begin with a weapon. It begins with a description of who Salt supposedly is. That is why the early momentum works so well. Before the film asks you to believe its largest action sequences, it creates a smaller and more believable fear. Someone else may be able to tell your story more convincingly than you can. And once the institution begins believing that story, Salt understands that remaining still will not protect her. The opening therefore completes his transformation. The captive who once survived by denying her identity is now trapped because someone else has defined it for her. To escape that definition, the film will turn space, movement, editing, color, and physical performance into part of the argument. Salt is photographed and cut as if the frame itself has stopped trusting Evelyn. Robert Elswit's cinematography, Stuart Baird and John Gilroy's editing, and Scott Chambliss's production design build a visual world based on inspection, obstruction, and escape. The official credits identify that theme, but what matters is how consistently their work pushes the same idea. Salt is surrounded by spaces that want to define where she belongs. The camera often places her inside controlled geometry. Office walls, interview room glass, elevator doors, security gates, corridors, and surveillance screens divide the image into compartments. She may occupy the center of the frame, but the architecture keeps cutting that center into smaller pieces. Even before anyone openly hunts her, the environment seems prepared to classify and contain her. Then the accusation arrives and the composition changes its function. Straight lines become barriers. Glass becomes something to see through but not safely cross. Corridors direct bodies toward confrontation. Doorways stop feeling like entrances and begin feeling like decisions. Salt is repeatedly framed through objects or watched from a distance, creating the sense that every image could become evidence. The film does not merely tell us that she is under surveillance. It makes the camera resemble surveillance without becoming completely cold. We remain close enough to feel her urgency, yet far enough to question what she is doing. During the pursuit sequences, the framing becomes less stable. The camera follows Salt through rapid changes in height, direction, and distance. She moves from enclosed rooms into shafts, stairwells, streets, rooftops, and vehicles. The visual rhythm keeps forcing her from one container into another. Escape never means open freedom. It means reaching the next temporary space before it closes. The editing strengthens this pressure through speed, but it is not speed for its own sake. Cuts connect Salt's movement with the reactions of those tracking her. She makes a choice. The institution notices the result. The search tightens. This creates a clear mechanism of cause and consequence. Even when she performs something impressive, the film quickly moves to the next danger. There is little time for admiration. Competence by seconds, not safety. That rhythm makes Salt's intelligence physical. Instead of pausing for explanations, the film lets us watch her read space. A ledge, a passing vehicle, a narrow opening, or an object within reach becomes part of a solution. The edits reveal those details early enough for the action to remain understandable, but not so early that escape feels comfortable. Her movement carries a roughness that suits the story. Salt is agile, but the film does not frame every gesture as elegant. She throws herself through spaces, absorbs impact, changes direction abruptly, and uses the environment with urgency. The action feels less like choreography being displayed and more like a mind solving a dangerous equation in real time. The color design supports the same emotional division. Institutional in thought restrained blues, grays, pale greens, and metallic surfaces. These tones make the CIA environment feel efficient but emotionally thin. It is a world built for procedure, not intimacy. Warmer light appears around fragments of Salt's private life. The contrast is not extreme, but it is meaningful. The professional world looks controlled and drained. The personal world carries softer textures and a sense of something lived in. Once the two identities collide, those visual categories stop remaining separate. Salt carries the coolness of the agency into personal spaces, while danger contaminates the warmer images associated with safety. The palette tells us she cannot keep her lives in different boxes anymore. Lighting does similar work on her face. Jolie is often lit clearly enough for us to search her expression, but not warmly enough to make it transparent. Shadows sharpen her features. Reflections and dark backgrounds isolate her. Her face becomes a surface the film invites us to examine for proof. But the proof never arrives. The film avoids exaggerated reaction shots. It stays with Salt's controlled exterior, forcing us to interpret tiny changes. A look held for half a second longer can suggest fear, calculation, grief, or recognition. The visual design protects the mystery by refusing to underline one answer. Production design adds another repeating image, systems within systems. Secure rooms sit inside guarded buildings. Screens show images captured by other cameras. Elevators travel through sealed structures. Vehicles become moving containers. Salt is always entering, leaving, or breaking through something. Put those details together and the technique becomes the clue. The camera divides her. The architecture traps her. The editing chases her. The color separates her lives. Her physical movement refuses every boundary. Salt does not escape because the world finally understands who she is. She escapes because she understands how the world has been built around her and sees the opening before anyone else does. That visual language now gives us the path into the story itself, where each escape creates a consequence and every choice pulls another hidden connection into view. The story begins its real movement when Russian defector Vasily Orlov enters the CIA and tells Evelyn Salt a story designed to destroy her faster than any weapon could. He describes a Soviet program that raised children to become sleeper agents inside the United States. These operatives were trained to live convincingly, wait patiently, and serve a mission that might not arrive for decades. Then he identified the agent supposedly assigned to assassinate the visiting Russian president. He gives that agent Salt's name. The accusation creates the central obstacle, but Salt is not immediately proven guilty. The danger comes from how well Orlov's claim fits the fears of the institution hearing it. Her training, access, and knowledge make her valuable to the CIA, yet those same qualities also make the accusation believable. Sony's official synopsis frames a pursuit around her flight, her effort to protect her husband, and her use of covert skills to stay ahead of her colleagues. Salt's first clear want is not to escape the country or clear her professional reputation. She wants to reach Mike. That choice gives the chase its emotional direction. Her colleagues see a suspected operative refusing orders. Salt sees a husband endangered by the accusation. Neither interpretation is irrational, but the system has no language for the difference. Ted Winter tries to hold on to the possibility that Salt is being framed, while counterintelligence officer Peabody treats uncertainty as a threat that must be contained. Winter reads her history relationship, Peabody reads it through risk. Salt understands that waiting for them to settle the question may cost Mike his life, so she runs. Her escape from the CIA building is the first major choice that turns suspicion into apparent proof. She uses internal knowledge, improvised tools, and the architecture around her to break out of a place designed to hold people like her. To Salt, those abilities are the only means available. To everyone watching, they confirm that Orlov may have described her correctly. This is the film's most effective causal engine. Salt does not escape because the evidence has become stronger. The evidence becomes stronger because she escapes. Once outside, she heads home and finds the private compartment of her life already violated. Mike is missing. Their apartment no longer feels like the warm alternative to intelligence work. It has become another searched space, full of absence and warning. Salt does not pause. She begins preparing. She collects money, documents, clothing, weapons, and materials concealed for an emergency. Again, the film turns survival into accusation. An innocent civilian would not have such a system. But Salt has never been an ordinary civilian. She is a covert officer whose job requires contingency plans. Professional competence and secret preparation now look identical. Her next movements point toward the assassination Orlov predicted. Salt alters her appearance and heads toward the funeral where the Russian president will be present. The pursuit is no longer only about catching a fugitive. It is about preventing an international act. The story now asks you to judge Salt without access to her intention. We see what she does, but the film withholds the sentence that would explain why she does it. The disguise looks like commitment. The infiltration looks like planning. Her refusal to contact the CIA looks like betrayal. Yet her concern for Mike keeps another reading alive. Salt may be walking into the predicted attack to carry it out, stop it, or expose something inside it. At the funeral, she defeats layers of security and reaches the protected space around President Medvedev. Salt appears to attack the Russian leader in front of witnesses and cameras. She does not merely fail to clear her name. She seems to complete the case against herself. But the scene is structured around appearance. The public version is simple. A CIA officer accused of being a sleeper strikes the target named by the defector. The private mechanism remains concealed, and that difference becomes another locked compartment. Her capture should end the chase. Instead, it creates the next decision. Salt has crossed a line that no explanation can easily erase. Even Winter's personal faith cannot survive unchanged. Peabody no longer needs to rely on Olaf's story because Salt's actions seem to validate it. Yet she escapes custody again. That second escape feels deliberate. Salt is no longer merely getting away from danger. She is moving toward the source of the accusation. She finds Orlov and enters the hidden world he described. Here, the story stops pretending that every part of his account was invented. Salt was connected to the Russian program. Her identity was constructed through training, replacement, and patience. The name Evelyn Salt is not simply a label that investigators have misunderstood. It is part of an operation built to survive inside American life. This reveal does not solve the character. It complicates her. If Salt came from that program, then her denial in North Korea, her CIA career, her isekai skills, and her secret preparations all gain a second meaning. Orlov did not create suspicion from nothing. He exposed a buried structure. The question is no longer whether Salt has been lying about her origin. The question is whether origin still owns her. Orlov believes it does. His value depends on the idea that childhood conditioning can become permanent loyalty. He treats identity like programming. Install it early enough, hide it deeply enough, and the person will eventually perform the command. Mike is used to test that belief. Salt is forced to watch the man connected to her chosen life become a casualty of the life chosen for her. The moment matters because Mike represents proof that she formed an attachment outside the program. Orlov sees that attachment as contamination. He attacks it to prove that the operative remains stronger than the wife. Salt controls her reaction. For a moment, that control appears to confirm Orlov's victory. She performs the identity he expects. She gives him the emotional emptiness that a perfectly conditioned agent should possess. Everyone studies her face and finds the answer they already believe. Then Salt acts. She turns against Orlov and destroys the immediate network around him. The choice does not erase her history. It reveals that performance and loyalty are not the same thing. Salt appears obedient because concealment is the language she was taught. She uses the program's own training to break from the man who believes he controls her. This is where the central want changes. At first, Salt wanted to reach Mike. Once Mike is taken from her, escape is no longer enough. Clearing her name is no longer enough. She now wants to prevent the latter operation and punish the structure that treated human lives as replaceable pieces. But she cannot simply return to the CIA and explain everything. Her actions have made that truth impossible, and she does not know how deeply the sleeper network reaches. The institution pursuing her may contain the people she needs to stop. That choice opens another compartment. Salt must continue appearing to serve the plan in order to get close enough to break it. Every act of resistance may resemble cooperation until the final second. She moves toward the White House operation with another activated agent, allowing the conspiracy to believe she remains useful. The scale rises from one assassination to a threat against the highest level of American power. What began as an accusation inside an interrogation room has expanded into a crisis built from decades of preparation. Now, every version of Salt is moving at once. The trained child knows how the operation works. The CIA officer understands the defenses around the target. The fugitive knows she cannot expect anyone to trust her. The wife has nothing left to protect except the meaning of the choice she made when she loved someone outside the mission. The story has taken her contradiction and turned it into a weapon. Salt can reach the heart of the conspiracy because no side fully understands which identity is in control. Her enemies believe conditioning will bring her home. Her colleagues believe betrayal has carried her away. Both readings reduce her to a system, but Salt is no longer trying to prove which label is correct. She is deciding which parts of herself will act. The sleeper program gave her a name to inhabit. The CIA gave that name authority. Mike gave the person beneath it a reason to choose. Orov's mistake is believing those layers must cancel one another out. Instead, they combine. The pursuit, apparent assassination, return to Orov, and movement toward the White House are stages in one struggle over ownership. Each group believes Evelyn Salt belongs to a history, nation, or mission. Her rebellion is the claim that experience can change what training began. She enters the final operation still looking like the weapon everyone expects. But for the first time, the hand directing that weapon may be entirely her own. And this is the moment the box opens completely. The strongest thing Salt does is make competence feel emotionally dangerous. Angelina Jolie commands the film because she never treats Evelyn Salt as a character waiting to be explained. She plays her as someone who has survived by controlling what other people are allowed to see. That control creates tension in nearly every scene. When Salt is frightened, the fear rarely arrives as panic. It arrives as calculation. When she is grieving, the feeling is compressed until it becomes movement. When she lies, Jolie does not signal the lie with a theatrical change. She keeps the same disciplined surface, forcing you to judge the purpose behind it. The scene that proves this most clearly is Salt's confrontation with Orlov after Mike is brought before her. Everything in the moment depends on restraint. Salt is surrounded by people studying her for evidence of loyalty. Any open reaction could expose her. Jolie therefore has to communicate devastation without allowing the character to reveal it. Her face stays controlled, but the stillness becomes painful because we know what control is costing her. Then the scene changes. Salt's apparent obedience becomes preparation. The emotion she has concealed does not disappear, it converts into action. That transition works because Jolie does not suddenly become a different character. The violence grows out of the same restraint. Her performance shows that emotional silence is not emptiness, it is pressure waiting for a direction. The story construction is strongest when it uses action to produce new interpretations rather than simply new obstacles. Salt escapes the CIA because she believes Mike is in danger. The escape makes her look guilty. She approaches the Russian president for a hidden reason. The approach appears to confirm the accusation. She returns to Orlov because she needs access to the conspiracy. Her return looks like loyalty to it. Each decision advances the plot and changes the meaning of the character at the same time. That double function is difficult to sustain, and Sword handles it with real efficiency through most of its running time. The film rarely stops for a long explanation when a choice can carry the information instead. You understand Salt by watching what she risks, what she hides, and where she goes when every available path is dangerous. The structure also places you in the same interpretive trap as the people chasing her. You receive more information than Peabody, but not enough to settle the mystery. You can see Saul's concern for Mike, yet you cannot be certain what else she is protecting. You witness her skill, but every display of that skill supports two competing conclusions. This is where the film's speed becomes more than entertainment. Momentum prevents certainty. Before one action can be fully judged, the next consequence arrives. The movie keeps you slightly behind Salt, and that distance preserves her power. Philip Noyce's direction works best when he refuses to turn the chase into a celebration of invincibility. Salt is extraordinarily capable, but she is constantly under pressure from systems larger than herself. Security teams, surveillance networks, government buildings, motorcades, and locked facilities create the sense that she is fighting architecture as much as people. The visuals support that idea with repeated barriers. Glass walls reveal her while separating her. Corridors direct her into danger. Elevators, stairwells, shafts, and beacons keep placing her inside temporary containers. She survives by identifying the weakness in each space before it closes around her. That gives the action a problem-solving quality. Salt does not win because she is physically stronger than everyone around her. She wins seconds through observation. She uses timing, surprise, leverage, and the environment. This keeps the action connected to character. Every escape demonstrates the same trained mind that makes her suspicious. The disguise work also functions better than it first appears. It is not only a practical spy thriller device, it turns identity into production design. Hair, clothing, posture, and movement become parts of a constructed self. Each transformation asks whether Salt is revealing another authentic layer or simply choosing the appearance that will get her through the next barrier. James Newton Howard's score supports the film by maintaining urgency without making Salt's actions feel uncomplicatedly heroic. The music often pushes forward with tense rhythms rather than broad triumph. It gives the chase propulsion, but it does not tell you that the person escaping should automatically be trusted. Sound is especially effective when the film contrasts institutional noise with sudden concentration. Alarms, radios, engines, footsteps, and shouted commands create a world reacting to Salt as a threat. Then, inside key choices, the sound narrows. The result is the feeling that Salt is solving the moment while everyone else is drowning in the response. The unforgettable sequence is her escape from CIA custody and movement through the building. It combines everything the film does well. The agency believes it has contained the problem. Salt treats the same building as a map of possible exits. The editing keeps the geography clear enough for us to follow her decisions. The framing repeatedly places barriers around her, then shows how quickly she recognizes their weaknesses. Most importantly, the scene makes her innocence and guilt appear equally possible. An innocent woman would need to escape to protect her husband. A trained sleeper would know exactly how to do it. The sequence never pauses to choose between those explanations. It lets competence become the mystery. That is Salt at its sharpest. Jolie's restraint, Noyce's forward pressure, the divided spaces, the urgent editing, and the unsettled music all point toward the same conclusion. The film works best when it refuses to separate who Salt is from what Salt can do. Her abilities keep her alive. They also make every person watching her more afraid. Salt's greatest weakness is that it moves so quickly that some of its most important ideas never receive enough space to become fully convincing. The pace is exciting, but it often treats emotional consequences as obstacles to pass rather than experiences to absorb. Mike is essential to Evelyn's choices, yet the film gives us only a limited sense of their life together. We understand that she loves him. We understand that he helped save her, but we do not spend enough time seeing what their marriage actually gives her beyond safety and attachment. That gap matters because Mike is supposed to represent the life Salt chose for herself. When he is threatened, the story expects the loss to carry enormous emotional force. Jolie's performance applies much of that force, but the screenplay has not built the relationship with equal depth. Mike functions more powerfully as a symbol than as a complete character. The same problem affects several people around Salt. Peabody is intelligent and determined, but much of his role is limited to pursuit. His suspicion makes sense, yet the film rarely explores what the case costs him morally or professionally. Winter receives more personal texture, but the story protects its reversals by withholding too much of his interior life. When later information changes how we read him, the twist is effective as plot mechanics but less powerful as character tragedy. The film is often better at hiding information than developing the people who possess it. Its logic also becomes increasingly fragile as the scale expands. The early sections work because the conflict is focused. One accusation enters a secure institution. One officer runs. Her colleagues must decide whether they are chasing a victim or an operative. That is clean, tense, and believable within the film's heightened world. As the conspiracy moves toward national leadership and catastrophic political stakes, coincidence and access begin carrying too much weight. The sleeper network appears able to penetrate enormous systems while depending on plans that require several unpredictable events to unfold perfectly. Salt's improvisation remains exciting, but the larger conspiracy sometimes feels less like a functioning operation and more like a mechanism designed to place her in the next twist. That weakens the identity puzzle. The best reversals make you realize that earlier evidence had another meaning. Some later turns in Salt instead feel as though the film introduces new information because the existing explanation has reached its limit. Surprise remains, but the sense of inevitability is weaker. There is also a tonal shift between the grounded anxiety of the opening and the near superhuman action of the later film. Salt begins as a vulnerable officer trapped inside suspicion. By the final movement, her endurance and access sometimes push the story toward comic book territory. This is not automatically a problem. The movie clearly wants heightened action, but the physical escalation occasionally works against the human tension that made the opening compelling. When Salt survives one extreme situation after another, the question of identity begins competing with the simpler question of how much punishment the film will allow her to absorb. A little more restraint could have made her feel more endangered without making her less capable. The visual language also loses some subtlety as the plot intensifies. Early barriers, class wars, and controlled spaces express the film's themes naturally. Later, faster cutting and larger action beats take over. The movie remains readable, but it becomes more conventional precisely when its central idea should become most distinctive. Most importantly, Salt never explores the psychological consequences of childhood conditioning as deeply as its premise deserves. The program that shaped Evelyn is horrifying because it attempts to turn a human being into delayed machinery. Yet the film rarely slows down to examine what memory, loyalty, language, or intimacy feel like to someone raised inside that system. We see the result of the conditioning. We see Salt resist its control, but we do not fully experience the long internal struggle between those states. That missing depth keeps the film from becoming the richer identity thriller hidden inside its action framework. Salt has the clues, the mechanism, and the contradiction. It does not always give those elements enough time to connect emotionally. These weaknesses do not destroy the experience. The movie remains energetic, clear, and entertaining. Jolie's presence carries scenes that might otherwise feel too mechanical. The central uncertainty continues working even when the plot stretches credibility, but the film opens several fascinating compartments, then closes some of them before we can properly examine what was inside. Place Salt beside the Bourne identity, and the first difference is control. Jason Bourne begins without reliable access to his past. His body remembers skills his mind cannot explain, so the suspense comes from discovery. Evelyn Salt remembers far more than she reveals. Her mystery is not created by absence but by concealment. Bourne searches for the person he used to be. Salt knows the identities available to her and must decide which one deserves her loyalty. That makes Salt less emotionally intimate than the Bourne identity, but more slippery as a game of interpretation. Bourne's confusion draws you close. Salt's control keeps you at a deliberate distance. The Bourne films generally build stronger psychological continuity, while Salt delivers a faster sequence of reversals. Now compare it with Mission Impossible. Both place elite operatives inside institutions that suddenly treat them as enemies. Both use secured facilities, official procedures, disguise, and pursuit as action mechanisms, but Ethan Hunt usually works to expose a clear traitor and restore his position inside the system. Salt's conflict is more complicated because the system's suspicions are not entirely false. She genuinely has a concealed origin. Mission Impossible asks whether the institution has targeted the wrong man. Salt asks whether a person with a compromised history can still make the right choice. That distinction gives Salt a darker edge, although Mission Impossible usually handles team dynamics, planning, and action geography with greater precision. Salt is more isolated. Its hero does not have a trusted group assembling around her. Isolation strengthens the identity theme but limits the emotional variety. Atomic Blonde offers another useful comparison. Lorraine Broughton is also a highly capable female operative moving through deception, physical danger, and uncertain allegiance. Yet Atomic Blonde treats style as part of the character's armor. Its neon lighting, music, fashion, and long physical confrontations create an almost tactile personality. Salt is visually cleaner and narratively faster. Evelyn's disguises are functional rather than glamorous, and her fighting style is designed around escape more than display. Atomic Blonde allows you to feel the exhaustion of each confrontation. Salt often cuts quickly to the next problem. If you want heavier atmosphere and more physical consequence, Atomic Blonde goes further. If you want a compact thriller that keeps changing the meaning of its protagonist's behavior, Salt moves more aggressively. Hannah provides the most revealing comparison because both films involve women shaped from childhood into instruments of violence. Hannah, however, spends more time examining what conditioning removes from a person. Each protagonist encounters music, friendship, fear, and ordinary life with the unfamiliarity of someone discovering humanity outside training. Salt begins much later in that process. Evelyn has already built a career, a marriage, and a convincing identity. The film is therefore less concerned with discovering humanity than defending the humanity she has quietly developed. Hannah asks whether a weapon can become a person. Salt asks whether a person can stop others from turning her back into a weapon. That is the quality Salt brings to the comparison box. Other spy films may offer deeper psychology, stronger ensemble work, more believable tradecraft, or more ambitious action. Salt's distinctive move is making the protagonist's competence function as both her greatest advantage and the prosecution's strongest evidence. If you love Salt, watch The Bourne Identity next for a richer version of the operative searching beneath program behavior. Choose Atomic Blonde for harsher physical action and bolder visual personality. Choose Hannah for a more emotionally detailed exploration of childhood conditioning and chosen identity. If Salt did not work for you because its conspiracy felt too convenient or its characters too thin, The Bourne Identity is the strongest alternative. It offers similar pursuit and identity tension with tighter emotional grounding. If the rapid pace felt too polished, Atomic Blonde lets the action bruise the story more visibly. Salt may not surpass the best films surrounding it, but it occupies an engaging space between them. It has Bourne's hunted operative, Mission Impossible's institutional betrayal, Atomic Blonde's female physical authority, and Hannah's struggle against imposed identity. What makes it its own film is the question connecting all four comparisons, not who Evelyn Salt was trained to become, but whether anyone else still has the right to answer that for her. That question becomes larger when we look at the political fears, genre expectations, and cultural moments surrounding the film's release. Salt arrived in American cinemas on July 23, 2010, carrying a Cold War nightmare into a world that believed it had moved beyond the Cold War. Then reality made the premise feel unexpectedly current. On June 27th, less than a month before the film's release, the FBI arrested 10 people connected to a Russian deep-cover intelligence network operating inside the United States. The Justice Department described long-term assignments carried out by individuals living under seemingly ordinary identities. By July 8, all 10 had pleaded guilty to conspiring to serve as unlawful agents of the Russian Federation. A thriller about Russian operatives quietly embedded in American society suddenly appeared during an actual story about Russian operatives quietly embedded in American society. The coincidence did not make Salt realistic in every detail. Its sleeper program remains a heightened cinematic invention built for action and surprise. But the arrest changed the emotional climate around the premise. The idea that someone could construct an ordinary life, form relationships, enter respectable spaces, and still serve a hidden state interest no longer belong entirely to old spy fiction. That choice opens another compartment in Evelyn Salt. Her marriage, career, clothing, home, and professional reputation are not simply parts of a cover. They are the exact details that make the cover believable. The real-world arrest reminded the public that espionage might not always look like a stranger carrying secret documents through a dark alley. It could resemble a neighbor, colleague, parent, or spouse whose daily life had been built to survive examination. The film also entered a summer dominated by large, expensive spectacle. Inception remained number one during Seoul's opening weekend, earning about $42.7 million domestically, while Seoul opened in second place with roughly $36 million. Seoul eventually earned about $118.3 million in the United States and Canada, with worldwide reporting placing its total near $293.5 million. It was a substantial commercial performance, though not the kind that transformed the film into an unavoidable franchise. That commercial position fits the film itself. Salt was successful enough to prove that Angelina Jolie could carry a large international action thriller without the story being sold as a novelty. Yet it arrived between stronger cultural landmarks. Inception became the summer's major puzzle movie, while established franchises continued defining the action landscape. Salt was visible. It was not dominant. Critical reception reflected the same middle position. Metacritic records a score of 65 out of 100, indicating broadly favorable reviews rather than overwhelming praise. Rotten Tomatoes published consensus highlights Jolie's commitment while criticizing the plot as predictable and difficult to believe. The divide was not really between critics who hated it and audiences who loved it. It was between appreciation for its execution and frustration with its writing. That reaction remains fair. Critics frequently recognize the speed, practical physicality, and Jolie's ability to hold the character's ambiguity. The resistance came when the conspiracy demanded too many perfectly aligned events. Saul could make an individual escape feel immediate and convincing, then ask you to accept a national plot whose logic felt far less secure. The audience response appears to have been warmer toward the overall ride. The film's commercial endurance suggests that many people accepted its exaggerations as part of the genre bargain. You entered for pursuit, disguises, uncertainty, and Jolie operating at full action star intensity. On those terms, the box delivered. Awards attention also landed in the areas where the film was strongest. Salt won the Saturn Award for Best Action or Adventure Film. Its sound team received an Academy Award nomination for sound mixing, losing to Inception. The stunt work also earned industry recognition, including a Taurus Award connected to Janina Carlton's work doubling Jolie. Those honors make sense because Saul's craft is more accomplished than its reputation sometimes suggests. The sound design helps transform buildings, engines, alarms, and pursuit into pressure. The stunt work gives Salt's choices physical consequence. If anything deserved more recognition, it was Jolie's controlled performance. She performed several possible loyalties without simplifying Evelyn into a clean hero or obvious deceiver. Its afterlife has been steady rather than revolutionary. Estimated domestic DVD and Blu-ray sales exceeded $50 million, and the film has continued circulating through rental, purchase, television, and region-dependent streaming services. There is little evidence of a major streaming era reappraisal, so its second life appears closer to durable catalog popularity than sudden rediscovery. That is an inference from its continued availability and home entertainment performance, not proof of a new cultural wave. Does Salt feel timeless? Its central question does. Governments still fear hidden influence. Institutions still struggle to separate suspicious behavior from survival. People are still judged through partial information supplied by systems that move faster than explanation. But the film also belongs unmistakably to 2010. Its fear of Russian sleeper networks carries Cold War imagery into the early surveillance age. Its action style sits between the grounded physical urgency popularized by Bourne and the larger franchise spectacle that would dominate the following decade. Salt survives because that mixture remains easy to watch. Its politics are simplified. Its conspiracy has aged. But its central contradiction has not. The most convincing identity may be the one a person eventually chooses, even when someone else designed it first. That opens the way to the interpretations people continue debating because the film's answers change depending on which version of Evelyn Salt you believe was truly in control. The most useful theories surrounding Salt do not ask whether Evelyn was ever a Russian sleeper. The film answers that. The real debate is when her loyalty changed and what caused it. One interpretation says Salt had already rejected Orlov's program before the story began. Under this reading, her CIA service is not simply a cover that became complicated. It is the life she chose. Mike does not create her conscience. He gives that conscience a private home. Her actions at the funeral support this because she constructs the appearance of an assassination without completing an irreversible murder. She seems to follow the mission while quietly protecting its target. This theory holds up strongly. Salt repeatedly uses the expectations of both sides against them. She knows the Russians will judge loyalty through obedience, while the CIA will judge guilt through appearance. Her strategy depends on letting each side see the version it expects. The weakness is that the film withholds too much of her earlier inner life to prove exactly when the break occurred. A second interpretation argues that Saul's rebellion is not patriotic at all. It is personal revenge after Orlov destroys the life she built with Mai. This question appears in documented discussion around the ending. Does she stop the wider attack because she believes in the United States or because the conspiracy has taken the person she loved? The film supports both motives, but revenge alone does not explain everything. Salt takes risks beyond what would be required to punish Orlov. She prevents a catastrophe that could kill enormous numbers of people and redirect global hatred toward innocent populations. That suggests her moral break with the program is larger than grief. Mike may be the emotional trigger, but he is not the entire reason. The stronger reading is that love made choice visible. Mike proves that Salt could build the bond the program did not authorize. His importance lies not in magically transforming her, but in showing that identity can grow through voluntary attachment. Orlov believes removing Mike will remove the weakness. Instead, he removes the last reason Salt might hesitate to destroy the system that shaped her. Another debate concerns Peabody's final decision. Does he genuinely believe Salt, or does he gamble that releasing one dangerous operative is the only way to reach many others? The ending shows him recognizing that her apparent assassination was staged and that her account fits details the conspiracy could not easily explain. His choice is not blind trust. It is counterintelligence logic. Salt has become both a fugitive and the best path into the remaining network. That reading holds because Peabody never becomes sentimental. He does not decide she is innocent in every sense. He accepts that her history is ruined while judging her present actions separately. In a film obsessed with labels, he becomes the first authority figure willing to distinguish origin from allegiance. The alternate versions create the wildest theory. In the director's cut ending, clues suggest that another high-ranking American leader may also be a sleeper connected to the same childhood program. That possibility has led to debate over whether Salt's victory stops the conspiracy or merely removes one visible branch. This theory is supported inside that alternate cut, but it should not be imposed on the theatrical ending as confirmed fact. The theatrical version leaves the remaining network broad and undefined. The darker cut gives the idea a specific face and implies that the institution Salt protects may already belong to the enemy at its highest level. Put the theories together, and the film's most convincing answer is not that Salt becomes American Russian wife, or rogue operative. She becomes self-directed. The program trained her to perform identities. Mike taught her that one could be chosen. Peabody finally recognizes that the choice matters more than the label. That is the theory the film supports most clearly. Evelyn Salt's final loyalty is not to the nation that raised her or the nation that employed her. It is to the moral identity she assembled between them. Beneath the disguises, intelligence agencies, and political conspiracy, Salt is really about a fear almost everyone understands, The fear that your past may have decided who you are before you were old enough to choose. Evelyn's childhood training is the extreme version of something ordinary. Families, institutions, countries, and painful experiences all place expectations inside us. They tell us what loyalty should look like, what weakness means, whom we should fear, and what kind of person we are allowed to become. Most people do not receive those instructions inside a secret program, but nearly everyone eventually has to decide which inherited instructions still deserve obedience. That is the deeper conflict inside Evelyn Salt. Her enemies believe identity moves in one direction. The child is conditioned, the adult completes the mission. Everything between those points is merely camouflage. Under that belief, experience cannot truly change a person. Love is a distraction, friendship is manipulation, a career is cover. Choice is an illusion created to make the operation more convincing. Salt's life challenges that mechanism. She may have entered the United States with a design purpose, but the years she lived there did not remain empty. She formed relationships, she developed professional loyalties, she experienced rescue, trust, and attachment. Those experiences may have begun inside a false identity, yet the emotions created through them became real. That is one of the film's most interesting ideas. Something can begin as performance and still become truth. A person may accept a role because it was assigned to them. Over time, their choices inside that role can transform it into something they genuinely own. This is why Mike matters beyond romance. He represents a relationship that cannot be reduced to programming. He helped save Evelyn when she was vulnerable, and she allowed him close enough to see a part of her life that could never be entirely safe. Their marriage becomes evidence that she is capable of choosing commitment rather than merely performing it. Orov misunderstands this because he sees attachment only as operational weakness. To him, affection creates leverage. Remove the loved person and the trained identity should remain. But the film suggests the opposite. Love does not weaken Salt's constructed identity. It exposes the fact that she has grown beyond it. The recurring images of confinement reinforce this meaning. Evelyn is repeatedly placed inside cells, secure rooms, elevators, vehicles, tunnels, and guarded buildings. These spaces make physical what her history has done psychologically. Other people keep trying to place her inside a definition and lock the door. Prisoner, agent, traitor, sleeper, wife, weapon. Each label contains part of the truth, but none can hold the entire person. That is why movement becomes symbolic. Salt is almost always crossing a barrier, changing clothing, escaping a room, or moving between identities. On the surface, this gives the film speed. Beneath the surface, it expresses her refusal to remain inside a category selected by someone else. Her disguises carry the same contradiction. A disguise usually hides the real person. In Salt, changing appearance sometimes allows the real decision to emerge. She becomes visually less recognizable while acting more independently. The face changes, the choice becomes clearer. This connects back to her first denial. When Salt insists she is not a spy, this statement is factually misleading. Yet the film gradually reveals a deeper truth inside it. She may work in espionage and she may have been shaped by multiple intelligence systems, but she refuses to remain the kind of spy other people believe they created. Her denial becomes less about profession and more about ownership. She is rejecting the definition of her. The film also explores how institutions respond to uncertainty. Both the Russian program and the CIA attempt to understand people through classification. One creates identities, the other investigates them. Both systems become dangerous when they assume that information about a person is the same as knowledge of that person. Peabody sees suspicious behavior and builds a logical case. Orov sees childhood conditioning and assumes permanent control. Neither initially understands the private choices that exist between Evelyn's history and her actions. That pattern connects to ordinary life more directly than the film's conspiracy might suggest. People are often judged through fragments: where they came from, what they once did, whom they knew, or how they behaved during one moment of fear. Those facts may be accurate and still fail to explain the whole person. Soul does not argue that the past is meaningless. Her past gives her skills, trauma, instincts, and danger. She cannot erase it. The deeper message is that history influences identity without possessing it completely. Freedom in this film is not the absence of conditioning. It is the moment you recognize the conditioning and choose whether to obey. That is why Evelyn's emotional restraint carries such weight. She has spent her life surviving by hiding reactions. The same skill that once allowed others to use her eventually allows her to resist them. Her conditioning does not disappear, she redirects it. The weapon develops control over where it points. And that is the hidden meaning at the center of Salt. Becoming yourself does not always mean discovering one pure identity beneath every mask. Sometimes there is no untouched version waiting underneath. Sometimes the self is built from the pieces you inherited, the roles you performed, the people you loved, and the decisions you made when those pieces finally came into conflict. Evelyn Salt is not free because she discovers who she has always been. She is free because she decides who she will be next. Salt did not reinvent the spy thriller, but it proved that one of the genre's most familiar machines could survive a major change at its center. The role had originally been developed for a man, then rebuilt around Angelina Jolie. That history matters because the finished film does not constantly stop to announce that Evelyn Salt is a woman performing a traditionally male action role. She is allowed to be guarded, physically forceful, morally uncertain, and professionally dangerous without the story turning every quality into a speech about gender. Jolie described how the change required more than replacing a name, while the production reshaped the character without removing the thriller's hard physical demands. That may be the film's clearest legacy. Salt offered a studio action vehicle in which a female star did not need to imitate a male hero or be softened into a safer alternative. Evelyn's marriage matters, but romance does not define her abilities. Her appearance is used through disguise, but the camera is more interested in what she can calculate and endure. The film presents her as the engine of the conspiracy, the chase, and the box office proposition. It would be too strong to claim that Salt directly caused the female-led action films that followed. Reliable evidence for that straight line is limited. Atomic Blonde, Red Sparrow, The Old Guard, Black Widow, and other later projects belong to a much broader history that began long before 2010. Salt's contribution is better understood as proof of commercial and creative possibility. A large contemporary espionage thriller would be built around a woman without changing the basic scale of its ambition. Its influence therefore appears more industrial than stylistic. Later films did not copy Salt's exact visual language or sleeper agent structure. What became more familiar was the sight of a woman carrying the entire machinery of a major action production while remaining difficult, controlled, and morally complicated. Evelyn Salt helped make that image feel less exceptional, even if the film itself was not the first to create it. The unfulfilled sequel also shapes the legacy. The theatrical ending clearly leaves Evelyn moving toward another mission, and sequel development was publicly reported in 2011. Yet no second film has been released, and Sony's current catalog presentation remains focused on the original. As of August 2026, the safest conclusion is that the franchise possibility never became a completed continuation. That absence is frustrating because Salt ends where the character becomes most interesting. The first film spends much of its time asking which system controls Evelyn. A sequel could have explored what happens after she becomes self-directed, hunted by one country, betrayed by another, and responsible for finding agents hidden inside institutions she can no longer trust. Without that continuation, Salt remains a beginning disguised as a complete story. Its reputation has neither collapsed nor grown into untouchable classic status. The film is still officially available across digital and physical formats, which supports the idea of durable catalog life, rather than forgotten failure. It is remembered primarily for Jolie's performance, practical physicality, relentless pace, and the question built into its title, who is Salt? That question is the reason the movie still works. The politics feel simplified. The conspiracy feels increasingly improbable, but the character's conflict has aged better than the machinery around her. Modern action cinema continues returning to protagonists shaped by institutions, treated as weapons, and forced to reclaim ownership of their identities. Salt did not invent that struggle. It gave it one of the cleanest action star faces of his era. In film history, that makes Salt less a revolution than a hinge, a movie connecting the male fugitive thrillers that shaped it to a landscape where female operatives could increasingly lead the pursuit without needing permission from the genre. And because the planned future never arrived, the film's final promise remains frozen in place. Evelyn Salt running toward a larger war that cinema never allowed her to finish. Alright, full spoilers from this point. If you haven't seen the film yet, close this now, go watch it, and come back when you're ready. Trust me, you'll want to experience it fresh. The decisive reveal is not simply that Orlov told the truth about Evelyn Salt's childhood. It is that he misunderstood what his own truth meant. Salt really was raised inside the Soviet sleeper program. She was trained to enter American society under the identity of a child who had died, to build a convincing life, and to wait for the moment when that life would be converted into a weapon. Her CIA career is therefore both genuine experience and constructed access. The accusation exposes the foundation beneath a life that later became more complicated than the plan allowed. The film hides that answer in plain sight through Salt's behavior after Orlov names her. She never acts like someone whose only goal is to prove the accusation false. She behaves like someone who knows that part of it is true and that a public explanation would expose an even larger operation. That is why her escape looks so precise. She already understands the conspiracy's language. The first major twist is the apparent assassination of Russian President Medvedev. Salt reaches him at the funeral, seems to carry out Orlov's prediction, and then gives herself up rather than killing Peabody when she has the opportunity. On a first watch, that surrender can look like the end of her assigned mission. After the reveal, it becomes one of the film's clearest clues that she is controlling appearances rather than obeying the program. The spider she takes from her home is the hidden mechanism. Mike's work with spiders initially appears to be a small personal detail connecting him to a life outside the CIA. Salt turns that private detail into a covert solution, using venom to suppress Medvedev's vital signs so the world believes he is dead without making the assassination permanent. The object linking her to her husband becomes the tool that allows her to imitate the sleeper mission while quietly breaking it. That connection matters. Salt does not defeat her conditioning by forgetting everything she was taught. She defeats it by combining those skills with something the program never valued: the life she chose with Mike. Orlov's barge becomes the emotional center of the film. He reveals that Salt's history was real and tests whether her marriage has weakened his agent. Mike is brought before her and killed while the sleeper network watches her reaction. Salt remains still. She performs the emptiness they expect, allowing Orlov to believe that training has defeated attachment. But her stillness is camouflage. The moment Orlov trusts her, Salt turns against him and the surrounding operatives. In North Korea, denial protected her identity. Inside the CIA, silence made her suspicious. On the barge, emotional control becomes rebellion. The same behavior means something different because the person directing it has changed. Salt then continues toward the White House with Schneider, another sleeper hidden behind an official identity. His attack forces the American president and senior officials into the underground command bunker. Salt follows, making herself appear to be part of the operation while trying to reach its true center. And then the box opens again. Ted Winter, the colleague who defended Salt when Peabody doubted her, is revealed as another sleeper agent, Nikolai Tarkovsky. The man who appeared to represent her professional home was hiding the same kind of origin she was accused of possessing. That reversal is effective because Winter and Salt are mirrors moving in opposite directions. Salt was raised as a weapon and developed the ability to choose. Winter built a respected American identity and remained loyal to the command buried beneath it. His earlier support also changed his meaning. Winter was not simply the one colleague who understood Salt. He had an interest in keeping her useful and close enough for the operation to continue. His apparent fate becomes another controlled identity, performed more smoothly because it contains years of professional familiarity. Inside a bunker, Winter incapacitates the president and prepares a nuclear strike designed to produce catastrophic retaliation and hatred against the United States. The targets are selected not only for destruction, but for the political and religious consequences that would follow. Salt pretends to admire the plan and tries to persuade Winter that she remains one of them. Then the earliest spider clue returns. A broadcast reveals that Matveyev is alive. Winter immediately understands what Salt did. Her performance at the funeral was never obedience. It was a carefully designed interruption that preserved the illusion long enough to reach the people behind the mission. Winter locks her out and attempts to complete the launch while planning to leave her as the visible traitor. Salt breaks into the command space, stops the strike, and proves her allegiance through consequence rather than explanation. She does not become innocent of her hidden history. She becomes responsible for what she does with it. Even then, the institution cannot see the full picture. Reinforcements arrive and Winter presents himself as a loyal CIA officer while Salt is arrested. The film's central problem survives the climax. The person with the most convincing identity controls the first version of the truth. Salt refuses to let that version remain. As she is taken away, she kills Winter during one final sudden move. It is the action of someone who knows the system may protect his disguise long enough for the remaining network to survive. The helicopter scene with Peabody provides the actual resolution. Salt explains that Matveyev's survival proves she was not completing Orlov's assassination plan. Evidence from the barge also connects her to the destruction of Orlov's group. Peabody cannot erase what she was, but he finally separates that origin from her present loyalty. He allows her to escape into the Potomac so she can hunt the other sleepers still hidden inside the country. There is no post-credits scene in the theatrical version. The final image of Salt escaping is the sequel Promise. She ends the film without a nation publicly claiming her, without a husband waiting for her, and without a stable identity she can safely return to. My reaction to the ending is divided in exactly the way my 5.8 rating suggests. The Winter reveal gives the film one last burst of energy and completes the idea that institutions can contain identities they cannot recognize. But the conspiracy becomes so large and convenient that the emotional story risks disappearing beneath the machinery. What stays with me is not the nuclear threat. It is Peabody's decision. He does not declare Salt pure. He recognizes that a person can carry a compromised past and still make a moral choice in the present. When Evelyn Salt says she is not a spy, the film eventually shows us why the denial can be false and true at the same time. Espionage is what she was trained to perform. It is not the complete identity she chooses to obey. The box does not close with an answer to who is Salt. It closes with something stronger. Salt is the person who finally answers that question for herself. Salt earns a personal rating of 5.8 out of 10. It is a fast, polished espionage thriller carried by Angelina Jolie's control, physical commitment, and ability to keep Evelyn Salt emotionally unreadable without making her empty. The film understands how to turn competence into suspicion. Every escape protects her while making her look more guilty. Every disguise hides her face while revealing another part of her intention. That central mechanism remains sharp from beginning to end. Where the film loses strength is in the emotional and logical support surrounding that mechanism. Might matters enormously to Salt, but the screenplay gives their relationship too little room. The sleeper conspiracy becomes larger than its credibility can comfortably hold. Supporting characters often function as pieces inside the twist rather than complete people whose choices carry their own emotional weight. The result is an entertaining film with a genuinely strong central idea but not enough depth to transform that idea into a great thriller. You should watch Salt if you enjoy rapid pursuit stories, morally uncertain protagonists, hidden loyalties, practical action, and spy films that keep changing how you interpret the hero. Jolie fans will find plenty to appreciate because the movie trusts her to carry long stretches through movement, restraint, and presence rather than constant explanation. You may not connect with it if you need airtight plotting, realistic intelligence operations, deeply developed relationships, or twists that feel completely inevitable in retrospect. The film demands that you accept several convenient turns in exchange for momentum. For most people, streaming is the right way to experience it. The action is strong enough to benefit from a good screen and sound system, but the film does not require a cinema-sized presentation. Owning it makes sense for committed Jolie collectors or fans of compact 2000s and early 2010s action thrillers. Evelyn Salt spends the entire film being chased by people who believe her past contains the final answer to who she is. Her victory is realizing that the past can explain a person without being allowed to finish their story. Every film is a box, and we open this one together. Thank you for opening Salt with me here on the Film Box. This film leaves us with a question that reaches beyond espionage and secret identities. How much of a person is defined by where they came from, and how much is defined by the choices they make after they understand that past? Tell me in the comments when you believe Evelyn's loyalty truly changed. Had she rejected Olaf's mission long before the accusation, or did losing Mike finally push her to choose a different path? And if you enjoyed this layer by layer breakdown, support the channel by liking the video and subscribing. It helps us keep opening films beyond the surface, connecting the hidden details and asking what the story is really trying to show us. Every film is a box, and we've only just started opening them. That's the Film Box. See you in the next one.